Welcome to the Anime Audiophile Podcast. Please like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Konoha Shinden, Steam Ninja Scrolls. Chapter 4, Huge Rock. A mountain. Daisan said. Ah, a mountain. The six continued. A mountain, isn't it? I muttered, too. The three of us were standing stock still, dumbfounded, while looking up until our necks hurt. Because the object that was in front of our eyes was a thing that looked just like a mountain, no matter how you looked at it. But that thing, so big that it seemed that it reached the sky, wasn't a mountain, but a rock. And, originally, it wasn't there. What do we do? I asked, and the sixth scratched his head, troubled. What do we do? As one would expect, also the sixth had no idea. Or rather, I had asked him anyway, but from the moment I had taken one look at it I could vaguely understand that we were already in a situation we could do nothing about. Surely, this is... I looked up again towards the mountain-like huge rock that was towering over us before our eyes. The hot spring we intended to go to was underneath. The story began just a little while before. We were coming along towards a village in the recesses of a mountain that was on the country border of the land of hot water. It was a place surrounded by many close mountains, so hard to reach that you could as well describe it as a solitary island of the land. As for the reasons why we had gone to the recesses of the mountain like this, we also had the pretext of making a map, which was part of the mission of observing the areas near the country border as well, but, more than anything else, it was because we had heard that in this village there was a hot spring that had a good reputation, especially within the land of hot water. In the land of hot water, where you could come across various hot springs, the hot spring of this village, known to few people, was treated as a secret hot spring because it was very difficult to reach, and it was a hot spring you'd want to visit once, if there were a street leading to it. The sixth, who had obtained such information in a post town we had stopped by before, had decided to drop in on the way with his usual relaxed appearance, changing our schedule with flexibility. While there was also the story of developing the undeveloped areas near the country border in collaboration with the land of hot water, if many people said it was a good place, surely we should go and see it. We need to stop by, even if we have to rewrite the map of our journey, the sixth had decided. The distance to that village wasn't relaxing, unlike the sixth's appearance, but rather it was extremely stern as they rumored. But although we had become completely exhausted, we finally arrived to the village, and there was the aforementioned huge rock. The first one to notice that there was something strange was me, who was looking at the map as usual. I had compared the map with the actual scenery. I felt that something was different. Even if the map was old, I had heard that the cartographer was skilled, and it had always been accurate so far, but when we arrived there it had suddenly become strange. There's something that looks like a mountain in the place where the hot spring is marked. In the map, where the topography and the information of the village were noted down, they had left a memo, potato, and a hot spring mark. Apparently, potatoes were this village's local specialty, and from the fact that their fields were spreading out in the surrounding, I could understand the meaning of the memo, but... However, I couldn't understand the main point of the hot spring mark. Not only the symbol had been written in an improbable place, and the topography of our surroundings didn't match the map, but also there was no sign of the hot spring itself. Because it's an old map. The sixth said, and called out an old woman that was working in a farm nearby. Excuse me. I'm sorry to interrupt you while you're working, but which part is the hot spring? However, just when he said the word hot spring, the old woman shook her head. Hot spring? No good, no good. It has been completely buried. Eh? It has been squashed by the rock, she answered awfully loud, as if her hearing was a little bit poor. According to the old woman's tale, there had been a large-scale landslide about 1 month ago. That was the cause, and the village's well-known secret hot spring had been squashed by a huge rock that had slipped off from a mountain nearby, and had been buried. We went towards the actual place together with the old woman, who kindly showed us the way. It was exactly the place where the hot spring mark had been put into the map. The map wasn't wrong. And the huge rock towered before our eyes. It was so big that I should describe it mountain rather than rock. It was natural that all the three of us, when we had looked up, had called it mountain. She had said that the huge rock had slipped off from the top of the mountain together with the landslide, but rather, wasn't that a mountain itself? It was a mass of rocks so huge that it made me think so. In the slope nearby, there were also the ruins that had been excavated deeply. Comparing it with the map, the appearance of the mountain had changed a lot. The cruel scars left on the surface of the mountain indicated that there had been quite an impact in this place. Apparently, because of this landslide, the hot spring resort and the buildings that were nearby had been damaged, but luckily there were no casualties. That was really good. It merely resulted in this amount maybe because the population was that of a small village from the start. Even so, I could call it nothing but a miracle. The surroundings of the huge rock were in such a sorry state. I stared at the traces of destruction caused by the landslide and the huge rock. Apparently, since it was thing of already a month ago, the earth and the sand of the surroundings had already been cleaned up by the villagers to some extent. But even so, the after effects of the calamity were vividly left. In the middle of this, the huge rock. It was sitting there motionlessly, still squashing the hidden hot spring, the village's pride. It couldn't be removed by the hands of the villagers, and it had been enshrined above the hot spring for 1 month. How about the land of hot water? The sixth asked the old woman. We're a village in the recesses of a mountain, you know. So even coming here is troublesome, the old woman said, and she pointed. We looked, and several men were sitting in front of a private house in the middle of some constructions, and were having a drinking bout despite it was broad daylight. The ones sitting on brand new logs that were material for construction were probably workers. Forehead protectors were tied on the head of several people who were friendly chatting with them. They were ninja of the village hidden in the hot springs. Even if some people came, we are short-handed. It can't be helped. With a bitter voice, the old woman shook her head. Besides the carpenters in the village, several Yugakure ninja dispatched by the land of hot water had come, but even so it was like cooling a hot stone with a drop of water, she said. Unless they did something about the huge rock, the village couldn't complete its reconstruction. However, only several people were not enough manpower, and they couldn't possibly remove the huge rock. NGH, I'm so sorry to hear that. If I were 10 years younger, I could smash a rock like that. Dai-san clutched his fist, looking really frustrated. Say what you like, but it's impossible. The sixth said, and put his hand on the surface of the rock. This isn't a mere rock. It probably contains metal, the sixth concluded after brushing and knocking on the surface of the rock. Apparently, the thing was so hard that it couldn't be compared with the rocks around there. He said that a thing like that was buried in the top of the mountain, or maybe underground, and had slipped off together with the earth and sand. Suddenly, the word meteorite floated in my mind. Since it was a thing happened before I was old enough to understand it, I didn't remember it well myself, but they told me that meteorites had fallen incessantly in Konoha, once. It had been a calamity without precedence. Under the sixth command, the village avoided destruction, but I wondered if in the deserted summit of a mountain or in a wild land, the meteorites that had been falling that time were still there. A thing like that had rolled down onto the population after 10 years for some reason, I was thinking about these things. Of course, it was nothing more than a guess, but, that moment, oh, hi, travelers? Come here. The group that was having a drinking bout in broad daylight waved their hands towards our direction. It's an empty village, but what do you think about it? Come and have a drink. With a merry air, the men held out a bottle of sake. The sixth and Gai-san exchanged glances. For the time being, let's hear what they're saying. Right. We'll just look around, if you insist. After bowing slightly to the old woman, the two joined the drinking bout in haste. I bowed my head to the old woman, too, and followed after them. Oh, hey there, pretty miss. Surely you'll grow into an awfully beautiful woman, the men looked at me and said excitedly, with their faces red for the alcohol. I wondered for how long they had been drinking. Despite they were on their doorstep, they were considerably reeking of liquor. So much that I wanted to frown, pinching my nose, but since I was glad that I'd been called pretty, frankly, I decided to stay with a quiet and cheerful face. Fine, fine. Thank you for asking. The six took a sake cup, sitting down. Also, Gai-san quietly took a sake cup. Although they were Yugakure ninja, we didn't reveal our social position in a place like this, of course, and pretended to be mere travelers. It was a relaxing journey, but we were there on a mission. After you bothered to came all the way up here. The hot spring ended up like this. Well, drink it up, they say, but how are you going to drink that? Everyone was naturally wondering about the sixth, who had his mouth concealed. I was wondering about that, too. However, the sake cup that the sixth was holding was already empty. Before we even noticed, yeah. How the hell did you do it? Surely it was full before. The drunkards were blinking with surprise. However, well, it doesn't matter. You're a good drinker indeed. Come on, another cup. With this atmosphere, they resumed their drinking bout again. Probably the drunkards would have been like this no matter what country we come from, but the sight of those grown men who were drinking and merrymaking on their doorsteps felt relatively singular. Because my mother, who prefers excessively strong drinks, would probably never make a scene like that even if she got drunk. No, it'd be absurd to drink and make a scene all alone to begin with. How about the reconstruction? The sixth asked quietly. No, I give up. That's impossible. Impossible, a Yugakure ninja answered while gesturing exaggeratedly, his face red. Even if we've been told do something about that sort of thing, I don't know if it's a rock or a mountain. Yeah. We removed even the earth and sand, and we did the things we could do, the workers added to that. So, today also our mutual work has reached the time for a pause, and having a break is good, so here we are. Even if we work dripping with sweat, there's no hot spring. In this case, there's no other thing to do but drink. The workers gulped down their sake while laughing lively. No hot spring. Let's drink, it was a flawless theory. Geez, those guys at the middle don't understand anything. Imposing things on us just because this is a remote place. We had told them that we didn't want to go because it's far away. A Yugakure ninja began complaining. With that guys at the middle, he was probably talking about the center of the land of hot water rather than the village hidden in the hot springs. You'll understand if you come here and see, I said. What do they expect us to do about that sort of huge rock? Send us much more people, you bastards. Probably, they were feeling considerably disgruntled. Even if we stayed silent, the conversation proceeded of its own accord. To make matters worse, I don't know if by bandits or what, but they say that young girls have been kidnapped in a village nearby. They're kids about the same age of this little miss. How many were they, again? They? Suddenly becoming the center of the attention, I was taken aback. On top of that, I had let out a strange voice. As for me, I was sipping the water I was holding little by little, bored. The Yugakure ninja continued, sipping their sake little by little. So, you see, people's life is at risk, right? Of course, those guys have the priority. Right. That's why there aren't even reinforcements from Yugakure in our place. If it's so, wouldn't it be preferable to ask for reinforcements even from Konoha instead? One of them said, and the other ninja began laughing at once. Coming to the recesses of a mountain like this crossing the country border? No. They wouldn't come. We did come, but I didn't say it. Well, even if they bothered to come. In the same country with us like this, at first they'd only send underlings without much jurisdiction to inspect formally. The one sitting next to you who come to inspect is the previous Hokage, but I didn't say that, too. Even those guys would probably never have imagined in their dreams that the previous Hokage was quietly drinking sake next to them. Because he was a personality that shouldn't even be there in general. Since Konoha's name had come out during the discussion, I indirectly examined the sixth's appearance. The sixth was listening to the story silently with a composed expression. What was he thinking? One of the ninja agreed, with a bitter smile. That's for sure. There's no point if they send here guys like us. Or rather, even if a remarkable Earth release user came here, he alone wouldn't be strong enough, right? Really, as huge as it is, there's no way to do it. A deep sigh mixed with their complaints. Surely it was a fact that there was no way to do it. However, it was natural that they were dissatisfied, but nevertheless, they were not supposed to drink sake in front of their door. Even though they were drinking heartily, the workers were repairing the buildings that had collapsed with one thing or another, so I couldn't agree with the fact that even ninja in the middle of a mission had joined them with the theory we can't do it. Let's drink. If it had been just removing the earth and sand, even the villagers could have done it. Hadn't they been dispatched here to do the things that the villagers couldn't do? If it wasn't so, I don't know why they made them ninja. I secretly stared at them, who were grumbling. The ninja of the village hidden in the hot spring had a low level of ability. I had heard about it. Of course, just by looking at those sulking group, I didn't think that all the ninja were like this, but surely it seemed that they were practically postponing or folding their arms about this village's huge rock. They say that the land of hot water is a Pacific country and apparently has the tendency of hating extremely or stubbornly to have military power, and this kind of inclination and disposition is really evident even towards the hidden villages. Sure, loving peace is a wonderful thing. However, weren't they aware that peace is not a thing that is just vaguely there, but something you have to build and grasp and protect yourself? Didn't even the ninja of the village hidden in the hot springs undergo a painful and harsh training for this? I wondered if they had already forgot that the present time existed because the ninja of the world had fought as one, risking their life for peace during the Fourth Shinobi World War. I didn't understand well the circumstances of the other countries and the other villages, so it wasn't a thing I could say as a rule, but that made me think. Once, my father, who loved peace, had been killed by a man who had trained in the village hidden in the hot spring. Apparently, when he confronted with my father, that man had already become a missing nin, but I wondered what was he thinking while he lived in this country and trained in this village here. I had accidentally thought these things for a moment while I was walking in this country. When I caught sight of children who ran around happily and the beautiful scenery of a sightseeing area full of shops. Well, I was looking forward to a local specialty, but it had a questionable flavor when I tried to eat it. Or at the end of the day, when I closed my eyes while listening carefully to the night scenery. In casual moments like these, for some reason I suddenly thought about it. And even now, among this circle of men that were drinking sake, I was thinking about these things. Even if they were complaining about this and that, those good-humored men's drinking bout continued as usual. The sixth's face hadn't changed color yet, but unlike him, Gai-san was dead drunk, his face deep red. I hoped he wouldn't talk too much while he was drunk, but since even the others who were listening to him were in quite drunken state, it was all right. I, who had nothing to talk about in particular, could do nothing but smiling forcefully while sipping my water little by little. I was so bored. Suddenly, my eyes turned towards the huge rock. Bored? The sixth asked all of a sudden. Yes. Sorry. Since I was absent-minded, I had answered frankly without thinking. No, it's okay. You're worried about the huge rock, right? It doesn't matter if you leave your place. But it's okay, I'm keeping an eye on Guy. The sixth smiled. I decided to take advantage of his words. If it's so, I'll go looking at the huge rock for a little. I said, and stood up. Free from that air that reeked of liquor, I went towards the huge rock, breathing deeply. As I approached it, the cavities and the cracks of the rock became clear. The more I looked at it, the huger the rock seemed. Suddenly, the fact that a thing like that had slipped off was unbelievable. What kind of impact had it been? I slowly walked parallel to the huge rock. The hot spring was buried underneath. And unless they did something about this huge rock, the village would never return to its original condition. I tried to place my hands on the rock, as the sixth had done. The enormous rock was covered in moss here and there, and grass had grown onto it. Even if I had thought this and that about the Yugakure ninja, even I couldn't break this rock. Even if I had proudly thought about this and that, even I wasn't able to do anything in practice. In that case, I couldn't really criticize other people. It wasn't just about the Yugakure ninja. It was also about Shikadai. Just a few days ago, I was keeping him company in his training. I've been acquainted with Shikadai, who's my sensei's son, since he was born. Since I've also been training under my sensei, it immediately became a close brother-sister relationship. And when Shikadai entered at the academy, I've come to supervise his training instead of my sensei, who serves as the seventh advisor, and he's always busy. Even so, Shikadai is a person who tends to find things bothersome a lot, and in general he doesn't try seriously. To the point that whenever I keep him company in his training, I have to scold him even 10 or 20 times in a row. Moreover, the truth is that when I avert my eyes he disappears, and to make matters worse he's cheeky, considering his age. Unbelievable. Even that day, for the umpteenth time I deeply sighed at Shikadai, who wasn't trying seriously in his shuriken throwing training, thinking that it was troublesome. Look, cut it out with all your troublesome. In the world, there are also things that you have to do even if it's troublesome. Understood? I told Shikadai, crossing my arms and with a stern face. However, Shikadai himself was going off on a tangent with a distracted air. Shikadai, answer. I had unintentionally raised my voice, irritated. Thereupon, Shikadai muttered, sighing while looking away. You're annoying. Are you a mom? He said, making a face that resembled my sensei somehow. He was the spitting image for both his dress sense and hairstyle. His appearance oddly caused me to get angry again. I'm not old enough to be a mother. I'm a young girl. Yeah, I understood. The answer is yes. At that utterly contemptuous answer, I sighed again, repressing my willpower of shouting without thinking. Shikadai began throwing his shuriken reluctantly. I wondered since when he turned like this, despite the fact that when he was a child he was much cuter. However, apparently Shikadai was secretly popular with the girls at the academy because he looked like this. Probably, the fact that he had a composed and mature atmosphere among the boys of his class, and the feeling that he had the attitude, a little bit cynical, to consider everything troublesome, was amazing and cool and charming for the girls of his generation, but I wanted to say out loud, girls, wake up. You mustn't choose such a cheeky guy. If he stays as he is, he'll surely turn into a mere rebellious, no-good adult who thinks that things are troublesome. That's why, I'm here to make sure that he won't become so. I have to make him train steadily instead of my busy sensei. I have to pass down the techniques that I've learned from my sensei to Shikadai. That's my mission. For this reason, I must become much more adult. I suppress my anger. I must train my body kindly and gently to the point of spitting blood, never becoming emotional. Together with this decision, I firmly clutched my fist. I have to show him the way. I watched over Shikadai like that for a little while, and suddenly a voice coming from behind called me. How's going, Mirai? Ah, Shikamaru-sensei. When I turned back, there was my sensei, who had come behind me unnoticed. He was standing still in the shade of a tree, his arms crossed. My sensei standing still in the sunlight that filtered through the trees. It was really a scene worthy of a picture. The strength of the fist I was clutching decreased. Shikadai, who was looking at that appearance of mine, muttered again. Gross. Changing suddenly your tone just when Dad came. However, I didn't miss those words. Throw those in silence. Shikadai glared at me with extreme rage and resumed his training in a hurry. I was worried that he'd really become an all-talk but clever person. If he says another mocking thing, I'll grab his hair tied to look like the tip of a writing brush, drag him and knock him down. I thought while staring at the back of Shikadai's head. Then, here, I realized that I had accidentally raised my voice in front of my sensei. Wow. My cheeks became red. I thought, let's do something about the bad atmosphere of this place, and cleared my throat slightly. My throat clearing couldn't help but seem forced. Because it was forced. Cough, air, the training's alright. Oh really, sorry to interrupt. My sensei showed a complicated expression. Funny. But still awkward. What did I have to do? However, it had no effect on my fake cough, but it was true that the training was alright. I looked at the shuriken that Shikadai had thrown. The shuriken, which had flown revolving exemplary, had hit the dead center of the target. A nice sound echoed in our surroundings. Shikadai turned around and smiled as if he wanted to say, look what I did. His smiling face looked like his mother's rather than my sensei. Probably it was also the feeling that he wanted to show his father his strong point that had fired him up. It was a total bullseye. Even if he considered things troublesome, Shikadai was a determined guy when he decided so. That's why it was all the more disappointing that he had a troublesome disposition. Because even if he was good now, even if he had managed it somehow only with the intuition of his innate disposition, it was certain that he'd have some difficulties in the end, as he was now. It had been arranged that Shikadai would undergo the Academy's graduation test soon. The graduation had probably been arranged so that he would realize extremely well that it would be nothing but a start from that point onward. That's exactly why I wanted to teach him in advance the things that I'd been taught. I wondered if the fact that I didn't want him to taste any of the same hardship I tasted wasn't parental love, but rather sisterly love. At the same time, I also thought that unless he learned it firsthand he wouldn't be able to grow into adulthood. It was a complex feeling. Although, there was one thing I could say in any case. Even if it's all right, I'd like him to be much more devoted to his training. Right. He still lacks discipline. My sensei smiled. As he did so, he stared at Shikadai, looking amused. Also, the fact that my sensei could come and check the situation of Shikadai's training like this was surely because he had managed to find a little bit of spare time for himself. Otherwise, my sensei wouldn't have been able to be present at his training. He was so much busy. Usually, my sensei runs around here and there as the seventh advisor. The seventh is so busy that he always works using shadow clones, but I wondered if in a sense you could say that my sensei, who supports the seventh from the background, was even busier than the seventh. However, my sensei is fit for his job not only because he's excellent, but also because he's honest and hardworking. And I wonder why Shikadai, who's my sensei's son, grew up with such a lazy personality, despite he's the spitting image of him, my sensei and Shikadai. Every time I looked at those two, I wondered why. Please, scold him too, sensei. When he's training, he never ever opens his mouth without saying troublesome. Really, who did he take after? Who did he take after? For some reason, my sensei made a bittersweet smile. That time, he seemed somewhat helpless, unlike usual. As I thought, I had to transmit the importance of training from that point on. If I didn't, Shikadai would surely become a no-good adult who drinks in broad daylight and says nothing but troublesome when he opens his mouth. I clenched my fist again. Lack of discipline, I was thinking absent-mindedly while looking up towards the huge rock. See what happens when you tell other people training so much. No matter how much I clutched my fist, right now I didn't have enough power to do something about this huge rock. I wondered if I'd be able to do something about this huge rock sooner or later if I kept training from that point on. In the distance, the kind old woman of some time ago was working in her farm. Even while the men were doing a drinking bout, the old woman was always working. Nevertheless, I couldn't complain about the men. They had already done what they could do by themselves. Even the fact that they invited us for a round of drinks was probably because they wanted travelers who came to the village without going to the hot spring to like this village even if a little. All of them, they weren't bad people. I could tell it very well from every one of their words. However, I remembered the old woman's face that said even if some people came, we are short-handed. It can't be helped, while looking at the Yugakure ninja. Sooner or later was no good. If I didn't do something about it immediately, the village wouldn't be able to revive. However, I couldn't break the rock. Maybe it'd be impossible even for a 20-year-old Gai-san with a secret technique of some sort. To begin with, a secret technique of some sort was more unlikely to happen than breaking the rock. The sixth was so relaxed that it was unlikely he'd do it. I was cornered. With this, I didn't understand what we claimed to be ninja for. Now, what are ninja, if they're not able to help the only troubled old woman in front of their eyes? Hadn't we endured a harsh training to become the strength of people like this? However, that was the truth. I couldn't do anything. I was standing puzzled in front of the huge rock, when, even if we merely destroyed the rock, some big fragments would be left. The sixth said while he came round. Even if we just moved it somewhere in another place, we'd have a hard time. It'd be nearly impossible for few people like this. On the other hand, if we used a power so great that it destroyed it into very small pieces, we'd surely cause damage to the surrounding areas, he said, looking up towards the huge rock with sleepy eyes. At the sixth's words, I realized again that doing something about the huge rock was impossible. It was a foreign country after all. There was nothing to do. It was like that. I hanged my head, still not fully satisfied. It's impossible, right? This village will always be like this. No, there's another way. At these few unforeseen words, I stared intently at the sixth. Wearing a smile different from usual, the sixth told me, casually, there's a ninja who came to the country border on a mission. Just now, he's made contact with us. In this case, he'll come tomorrow about this time. The moment I heard these words, I felt as if everything had become bright in front of my eyes. Somehow, the sixth had called a ninja who could deal with the huge rock. The sixth had been thinking about this huge rock during the whole drinking bout. He had been thinking about it more seriously than me, by far. I'd been an idiot. It was impossible that the sixth would do a thing like forsaking just because he couldn't do it. The sun was setting, and the shadow cast by the huge rock was about to cover the village completely, becoming even more pronounced. In the shadow, I smiled of relief. Tomorrow, this village's secret hot spring would be resurrected. Ah, come to think of it, what about Gai-san? I looked towards the men who were merrymaking, and Gai-san was sleeping in a position that made him almost fall from his wheelchair. Around him, also the men were sleeping together in a huddle, snoring. Since everyone fell asleep, I have some free time. The sixth, who usually had sleeping-looking eyes, complained unusually. Thus, the following day, I kept waiting for our helper, restless. The previous night I had been excessively excited and I hadn't been able to sleep enough, but a short while later, when morning came, I became suddenly quiet, and on the contrary I felt uneasy. The sixth had used the expression a ninja who came to the country border on a mission. It was neither some ninjas nor a team. So it meant that the one who would come along as our helper would be just one. I quickly checked the sixth's appearance. Ouch, it hurts as if my head was splitting in two, why? Gai-san moaned while holding his head with both his hands, and the sixth joined the men's drinking bout again together with him. Even that day, it looked like the Yugakure ninja weren't doing anything in particular, and they were hanging out, apparently free. That day, they were having a drinking bout with playing cards in one hand. Who did the sixth call, I wonder? As I missed the right timing to ask this, the drinking bout continued and time passed. Right now, I was thinking about the ninja who was coming towards that village. Was there really a ninja who could do something about the huge rock all by himself? The only one I knew that looked like he could do something like that was the seventh. However, it was unlikely that it was the seventh, since he had to stay in the village as Hokage. He was so busy that it was unlikely that he'd send a shadow clone. In that case, Perhaps the ninja who was casually getting near because of a mission, the one who was so strong that could be compared with the seventh, was the one who was wandering the world for Konoha's sake, the legendary. That moment, a human silhouette appeared at the entrance of the village. The village was in the recesses of a remote mountain. Now that there wasn't the hot spring, the village's pride, you could say that the one who was expressly passing by in this place at this time was probably the ninja who had received the message from the sixth. I observed the human silhouette, holding my breath. With a calm way of walking, one man entered in the village. He was wearing a cloak, looked like as if he was accustomed to traveling, and went straight towards the rock. A massive figure, gentle features, and a bag of chips on his left hand. So, he surely was Choji-san. He was completely different from the person I had imagined. "Ah, Mirai-chan." Choji-san, who had noticed me, raised his hand. In his hand, he was holding a half-eaten potato chip. Apparently, he had been walking while eating. Nearby, the men who were amusing themselves with the cards raised their voices. "All right, one of the Enoshikacho." The men began stirring at once. As usual, they kept drinking sake in front of their door. Here we go." "Yeah, today's hot." Choji-san took off his cloak and wiped off his sweat while sitting down heavily at the foot of the huge rock. "Just right, the shadow will save me," he said, and finished eating the rest of his bag of potato chips. Then, he fetched a new one from the bag and began eating it straight away. This time it had a different flavor. At Choji-san's figure, the anxiety I had been feeling since morning rose immediately. Sure, I knew that Choji-san was my sensei's best friend, and with Ino-san of the flower shop the three of them were called the Enoshikacho trio that Konoha was proud of, but have one too, Mirai-chan. Choji-san handed me another pack he fetched from his bag with a smile. "Ah, thanks." I took it, perplexed. He had offered it to me with a smiling face, and I opened it. I wondered if he wasn't just a good-humored father. About Choji-san, even I knew since I was a child that he was my sensei's best friend, but I had never had very much the impression that he was a resourceful person who actively completed his missions. Rather than that, I had the impression that he was a kind, daughter-loving father, whom I often caught sight of while he was eating in good terms with his daughter. I couldn't imagine Choji-san doing something about that huge rock all by himself. Me had never heard that he was an earth release user, and even if he used the Baika no Jutsu, a secret technique with which you enlarge your body, which Choji-san of the Akimichi clan had inherited, I wondered if this huge metallic-looking rock wasn't still too much for him. However, the sixth had said that there was another way besides crushing it. "Choji-san, it's a huge rock, but..." "Yeah. There's a hot spring under it, right? We have to restore it right away." Choji-san replied cheerfully. "First of all, I'll try to thrust it." "Eh? An H? I'll thrust it. What's wrong with that?" "Try to thrust it." "Fry to crust it? No, thrust it?" "Thrust it." I was taken aback by that unexpected suggestion. Surely, if you couldn't break it, you could remove it by pushing it. Simple. However, it was too simple, and apparently there were really a lot of people in this world who could do a thing like that. But Choji-san was the one who would move and push a rock so huge that it reached the clouds. "You can do it." If I don't give it a try, I'm not sure, but I'll try to give my best." Choji-san answered with an extremely buoyant attitude. I wondered if it was really all right. Thereupon, the sixth voice called us. "Sorry. You came all the way to a place like this." Despite my anxiety, the sixth, who had come along, was his usual self. Apparently, even that day the men had made him drink, but the color of his face hadn't changed a bit. "You were far away, right?" "Yes, this is a steamed potato. It's hot, so pay attention." The sixth thanked Choji-san, smiling. He had come to give me and Choji-san a steamed potato. Potatoes were harvested in the village. In the land of hot water, they cultivated agricultural produces taking advantage of the terrestrial heat. Their potatoes are extremely famous and are called geothermic potatoes by the local people. No matter which post town you go to, you'll surely see one dish of the geothermic potatoes, which are steamed with the steam of the hot springs. It was the same even in this small village. That's a geothermic potato. It wouldn't be an exaggeration saying that I came here to eat that. With a chuckling smile, Choji-san bit into the steaming potato. Even though he was eating potato chips, they were still potatoes. I wondered if he wasn't tired of them. Or rather, I had the feeling that he had said that he came here to eat those, but the rock. I was in a dither between the geothermic potato I had been given in my right hand and the bag of chips I had been offered in my left hand, and the sixth called out to me gently. Well then, it's all right. Stay calm and wait and see. Then, the sixth went back to Gai-san's side. Thereupon, Gai-san, who looked like he was still suffering from the hangover, suddenly began shaking from convulsions while holding his mouth. The men around him were noisy for another reason. Those guys over there looked terrible. While I looked at that scene, shocked, Choji-san ate completely the potato he had been offered. Maybe because he was full after the meal, he wet his throat with the water he was carrying. All right. Tap, Choji-san clapped his knees. Finally the time had come to push the huge rock. Let's eat the second course. And Choji-san stretched his hand towards another bag of chips. He was a person that it wasn't clear where his meal finished and when his snack time began. Working hard on a mission, I watched Choji-san not doing so and eating his potato chips. Meanwhile, I finished eating my geothermic potato as well, and since I had nothing to do I came to the point of eating the crispy potato chips that I had been given this time. A strange time flowed, in which I ate potato chips while staring at a person who eagerly ate potato chips. Then, Choji-san's hand finally stopped. He had finished eating all the packs of potato chips that were squeezed in his bag. Or rather, somehow the bag itself was just one big pack. However, with that he started his work of doing something about the huge rock at last. I gave him a look of anticipation, but Choji-san immediately made a downhearted face. I'm sorry, but as I am now, I'm short of calories. He had eaten so much, and still it wasn't enough. It looks like I'll be able to do something with a little bit more, the calories of just another bag of chips. Choji-san stared intently at the bag in my hands. I showed him the bag in return. I had already eaten its content. Is that so? There are no more? I am sorry. No, but, Choji-san, you had given it to me. Yeah, you're right. But what do we do now? I want to eat potato chips. Humph, Choji-san sighed. Choji-san is a ninja who uses a special technique consuming a large quantity of calories. Apparently, to push the huge rock that was towering in front of our eyes, he needed to eat just a little more potato chips. There weren't steamed potatoes, and we needed potato chips, which contain oil, at any cost. However, the problem was that this was a village in the recesses of a remote mountain that could be even compared to a solitary island of the land. They didn't sell things like potato chips. We could buy them if we had gone down to the nearest post town, but it would have taken too much time. By the time Choji-san would come back to the village, his stomach would probably become empty. Then, what do we have to do? Maybe discussing with the sixth. No, or else, in front of me, who was hesitating, someone was holding out a potato. It was the old woman from yesterday. There are plenty of potatoes. Apparently, the old woman had been watching Choji-san eating his potato chips continuously and had come here, worried. Probably it seemed that his stomach was quite empty. Is it all right? Prompted by the old woman, who nodded with a smile, I took the potato. Then, at the same time I made a decision. If the huge rock couldn't be destroyed, we removed it by pushing it. It was simple. In that case, if we couldn't buy potato chips, what should we do? We had to make them by ourselves. I, who had borrowed the old woman's kitchen with her favor, was staring at the potato, stiff. Because even if I had thought of making potato chips, when I thought about it I had eaten them when I bought them, but I never made some. I had never thought that I'd try to make some by myself to begin with. Until then, I thought that selling them was normal. I thought that they were a thing you get immediately, as long as you have money. However, also the potato chips line in the shops wouldn't exist from the start if there weren't people who cultivated potatoes with the sweat of their brows like the old woman. Then of course, if there weren't someone who processed them, potatoes wouldn't become potato chips. It was obvious, but I thought again that someone had just made them instead of me until then. If nobody did it, even the most natural things in the world would be impossible. Now, I had to do by myself something that someone had naturally done for me. Nonetheless, surely potato chips weren't supposed to be a product that needed a complex procedure. In short, I had to deep fry finely chopped potatoes. I had no choice but manage it somehow, making a free use of the information I possessed. There was no sooner or later, I had to do it now. I prepared myself and grabbed a carving knife. First of all, I peeled a washed potato. Then, I cut the potato, thinly and as uniformly as I could. And then, the slippery part of the cross-section, if I remember correctly, it's called starch or something, a thing like that, I dropped it into the water, refining it. Probably it was okay to replace the water 2-3 times. When I shook off the dampness of the potatoes well, I finally put them into the oil. At first, the low fire was okay. I gently put the finely chopped potato, slice after slice. Thereupon, foam began rising from the edge of the finely chopped potato. I carefully fried them, while moving them with the chopsticks so that they wouldn't stick to one another. I heard a light and delicious sound, characteristic of deep-fried food. It was a nice tune. I kept frying the potatoes, absently. In the end, when they slightly took color, I fried them crisp and dry with a strong fire. I took the potatoes out of the oil in turn, and shook the oil off them. When I put the salt while the potatoes I had taken out were cooling down, I did it. A mountain of potato chips was towering on the tray in front of my eyes. I made too much of them. I had prepared extra ingredients because I was afraid of making mistakes, but deep frying things was more enjoyable than I had thought, and in the end I had kept frying them one after the other. I'd never have thought that I'd be able to make them well from the start, but anyhow, it was a huge success. I thanked the old woman, and when I carried the potato chips to Choji-san, the men who were having a drinking bout gathered around me, maybe lured by the scent. "What's this?" "Oh, they look tasty. I was just craving for a snack." Several men began saying things like these. "Here, everybody, I'm glad, but..." Considering the situation, normally I couldn't have offered them, but anyway I had made too much of them. It was just right. I held out the mountain like helping of potato chips. Just like children, the men happily stretched their hands towards the potato chips one after the other. Maybe because they're deep fried, they're tastier than the ones you buy. Their simple flavor is so good. The sake comes into play. This village's potatoes make unexpectedly good potato chips, don't they? The men ate the potato chips while saying tasty, tasty all at once. On the other hand, also Choji-san wasn't losing to them. "Thank you, Mirai-chan. They're delicious." As he said these kind things, a large amount of potato chips were immediately stuffed in his mouth. With a tremendous impetus, Choji-san grasped the potato chips and put them into his mouth. Probably, I had never seen such a sight, which matched exactly the imitative sound munch munch. Perhaps, the fact that hands were stretching from all the directions and the potato chips in front of his eyes were decreasing had ignited Choji-san's appetite, and with a way of eating that didn't seem the one of a person who had already eaten up a lot of packs of the same thing, Choji-san decreased the whole helping in a flash. Immediately, the potato chips decreased till the last one. Yum! Choji-san put the last potato chip left on the tray in his mouth, and slowly savored it. The flavor of potato expands into the whole mouth, Choji-san made a satisfied expression while nodding, his eyes closed. Rather, it was just right that I had made too much of them. It had turned out that they were almost not enough. Yeah. If it's so, it looks like I can go. Watch out, everybody, step back. Choji-san stood up and turned towards the huge rock while stretching his shoulders lightly. Alright, here I go. Choji-san raised a psyched roar, and at the same time white smoke wrapped him all around just as if an explosion had happened. Immediately after this, the earth shook. Something huge stepped firmly onto the ground. A giant person appeared suddenly from inside the white smoke. Choji-san, who had become huge, grappled the huge rock that was towering high in the sky. It was just like a contest of strength between a huge man and a huge rock. A mythic sight unfolded before my eyes. Voices of commotion rose from the men who had gathered around me. They probably had noticed here for the first time that Choji-san and we weren't mere travelers, but ninja. Also, the people of the village, old woman included, rushed out of their houses at once with curiosity. Ooh! Choji-san's war cry resounded in the village. On his back, the power of the chakra had gathered so much that it was visible, and beautiful wings had appeared, just like a butterfly's. Amazing, beautiful. I muttered when I noticed them. It was the first time in my life I had seen Choji-san like that. This was the power of the famous Akimichi clan, which is said to be the shield among Konoha's weapons, almighty for both offense and defense. However, the huge rock hadn't made the slightest quiver yet. Mirai-chan. From a remote point above my head, Choji-san's voice poured down on me. It was as if his voice was squeezing out of his throat, maybe because he was putting his body and soul into pushing the huge rock. Aren't there some potato chips left? There were still not enough. I yelled without thinking. Didn't he have enough calories yet, even if I gave him the potato chips that I thought I had made too much of? Still, the huge rock was unyielding. A little bit more, a little bit more. Choji-san's strained voice resounded around us. Has it been a poor move to share the potato chips with everyone, thinking that they were too much? However, I could do nothing about it anymore. And, that moment, Nuu, I'll push it too, Mkai-san, who had jumped up all of a sudden, began pushing the huge rock. Him full power. Gai-san shouted. Maybe because he got drunk for 2 days, his face color was very bad. Even so, Gai-san didn't stop pushing. Fixing his wheelchair, he poured all his strength into his pushing arms. Oi. Yeah. Seeing Gai-san like that, the Yugakure ninja followed him. We'll push it, too. We'll show you the strength of the ninja from Yugakure. We won't let some strangers outdo us. Am I right? Saying this, they lined up next to Gai-san. Face to face with Gai-san's figure, who had gone ahead taking the initiative, they looked as if they had suddenly sobered up. We'll get back this village, this hot spring, the Yugakure ninja yelled. From there on, everything happened in the blink of an eye. Following the Yugakure ninja, all the workers and the villagers rushed towards the huge rock at once. Every oni, puyoish. Yo-oh. At Choji-san's feet, everyone put their strength into clinging to the huge rock. Well then, after so long, I'll get serious, too. The sixth relaxedly went towards the huge rock, and I followed him, too. Before the huge rock, the roars and the cheers flew about due to the people gathered. Hey! We won't lose. Give your best. We're almost there. While I was surrounded by a lot of voices, I began pushing the huge rock, too, joining the circle. Then, the time came. With a roaring sound that shook the earth, the huge rock slowly moved. It was right after the huge rock moved just a little. Everyone's strength became one, and the huge rock slid slightly. Choji-san pushed it straight away, taking the chance. While the villagers, who were pushing it with their whole strength, collapsed pitching forward, the hot spring surged up from under Choji-san's feet. The hot spring, which was squashed under the huge rock, was now restored. While a hot spring rain poured down on them, everybody raised joyful shouts. People who hugged one another, people who broke down crying, people who began praying, joining their hands towards the hot spring. A rainbow formed by the warm rain was spanning above those people's heads. This sight, so happy that it seemed the happy ending of a tale to the extent that it's too good to be true and you almost burst into laughter instinctively, was spreading in front of me. In front of the removed huge rock, next to the hot spring, Choji-san, who had returned to his normal size, sank down to the floor. Maybe because he had consumed a huge amount of calories, he had become thin beyond recognition. My and Choji-san's eyes met. At Choji-san's figure, who was holding his stomach even if he was smiling, I instinctively made a bitter smile. Later, I'll ask the old woman to let me use her kitchen again, I thought. The next time, I'd prepare much more potato chips for Choji-san, who was feeling hungry. There wouldn't be a helping as big as a mountain in the tray, but a helping as big as the huge rock. No matter how much you search for it around the world, and hot spring at the base of such a huge rock is nowhere but here. Nearby, the Yugakure ninja were having this kind of conversation with the villagers. That rock, if you look at it well, it looks like a potato, right? Near the rock, we'll sell potatoes taken from the fields nearby. Also, other villages have steamed potatoes, so how about potato chips? Apparently, they had immediately started making plans of reconstruction. That impression was completely different from when they were sulking and drinking sake. They were discussing about what was the best thing to do so that tourists came back to the village, their eyes sparking. My head still hurts. It's a terrible day. The sixth came along, joining a grumbling Gai-san. The sixth was sporting a pale face, in contrast with Gai-san, weary for the 2-day drunkenness. I'm glad it all ended well. The sixth looked at the Yugakure ninja, and smiled. It's quite nice. Something like this. I smiled as well while I looked at the rejoicing villagers. Despite the fact that countries and situations and business and ages and genders are disconnected, the moment when we pushed the rock, everybody's feelings were surely one. I think that it's the reason why the rock moved. That's awesome. The scale might have been different, but I suddenly wondered if the Fourth Ninja World War, where they fought as the Allied shinobi force for the first time in history, hadn't had such atmosphere. A village that had lost its secret hot spring and without tourists. They didn't hate the huge rock that was the cause of it, but they searched for a solution to live together with it. Huge rock and hot spring. It was a strange combination, but in the end also this huge rock will probably end up with being accepted by a lot of people as the symbol of the village. It was better like this, rather than leaving it as the painful memory of a catastrophe. We'll make country style, simple flavored potato chips a specialty. Not country style. This is just an ordinary rural area. Rural area? You bastard, are you making fun of our village? And no, if it's so, how about naming this huge rock Potterrock and turning it into a mascot? Hearing the fiery discussion between the Yugakure ninja and the villagers, I updated the information of the map on my hands. Below the hot spring mark and potato, I added a new note. Huge rock hot spring potato chips. Please, let it become a village loved by a lot of people. While I made this wish, I joined up with the others as well. End of Chapter 4. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe for lots more.